we're trying to solve this from a mental perspective, from what needs to happen from our thinking. And there's a lot of value for like cognitive behavioral therapy, and all these things have its place.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're trying to heal ourselves. So we're trying to heal this collective of body, mind, emotion, spirit, but we're not really addressing or using the body, which is a huge component in it.
Welcome to the Lucas Skrobot Show. I'm Lucas Skrobot, and this is where we uncover purpose, relentlessly pursue truth, and own the future. Today, we have a special interview with Manal al Dabbagh, and I'm really excited about this interview for a couple of reasons. The first reason is, oftentimes, when I sit down with someone in an interview, it kind of feels like we're in an echo chamber where I'm agreeing and she or he is agreeing, and it's just all sunshine and rainbows. And I'm sure this episode actually is going to be quite pleasurable. But as we have dug in with Manal and I and the pre-interview and talking about what do we want to discuss on this episode, I think both of us found out that, we see the world a little differently. And I had a moment where should we do this? Should we not do this? I hate, as much as I love conflict, I kind of hate conflict because I don't want to get the reputation from my listeners or from my guests of it was kind of argumentative. So we're going to stay away from the argumentative stuff, and we're going to realize that we can still have a relationship, we can still be friends, we can still have civil discourse when we don't agree with things, and that is actually the place that we get to move forward into understanding one another. It's where we disagree yet still choose to maintain relationship, maintain civil discourse. So today we are with Manal. Manal is a parenting embodiment coach, a movement coach, and we're going to unpack what embodiment is. We're going to unpack what she does, her work, and we're going to get into the weeds of how and why we see the world differently and what that means for you and for I. So Manal, thank you so much for being with us here on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Lucas. I'm really quite excited to dig into this conversation and start. It's just a curiosity, really. From my part, is when you're doing something for so long and this is how you see the world, how I see the world, and someone tells me, that's not how I see the world, I'm really driven by curiosity. It's I wonder what is, the view from your, stance, from where you are, and from your experience, how do you see the world? So I'm quite excited, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited that you are here. So let's start off by you answering the question, what does it mean for you to be a parenting embodiment coach? What even is embodiment as you would define it?
Okay, so embodiment is a word that has becoming more popular in the last 5-10 years. It's something that it's existing for so long, so it's not that anyone invented it. And there are so many different definitions for what embodiment is. For me, embodiment is who I am in the whole sense of thoughts, emotions, feelings, body sensations. One of my teachers, Mark Walsh, would say it's the subjective experience of the body. And another one of my teachers as well would say it's being with the sensing, felt body as well as the thinking mind. So there are so many different definitions of it, but it's quite an interesting field that it's about understanding who we are from quite a deep perspective, a felt sense. So we could feel and embody our thoughts. We could see how, our culture, our upbringing, everything that we have encountered in life is embodied in our cells. So it's something that it's happening. And it's great to be aware of it and use that in not only understanding ourselves better, is also in developing ourselves in ways that we would want to develop in certain qualities, in certain, states, and so forth. So, yeah, that would be my view on it. And probably you'd find someone having a different point out.
So so what you're saying, embodiment, it's kind of taking more of that holistic approach of saying we actually are a body, we actually have a spirit, and we actually have a mind, a seat of emotions, and all of those are interconnected. Because I know, a lot of people kind of in that Eastern, and you guys kind of embodiment probably tangentials off of a lot of kind of like that Eastern mysticism, sort of yoga practices, where they say that our body is just a vehicle that we pass through this life, and we are spirit, and our spirit is just in this vehicle of a body. So is embodiment saying, no, we actually are our body, we actually are our mind, we're not merely spirit, and this is not just that the physical realm isn't as real? Because that's a lot of what I hear from that side of the aisle is kind of this denouncement of the material realm and this exaltation of the spirit realm, where there is no truth, no absolute truth, and where this is almost just this dream state that we're passing through to pass on to nirvana or whatever the reincarnation that they believe.
Yeah, well, embodiment is, it's there in the world. It's the body. Because, whether you want to argue about what that spirit is and what happens after we leave this body, we are right now in a body. And denouncing or kind of trying to get rid of that part of us is, I don't know if it's useful. It's not. I don't see it as useful. So everything that who we are, even our spirit, it needs the body to animate. So it's not. It's essentially that we are all these things at the same time, and the body is the vehicle of how we could see it. So if I would say simple, way of explaining it, if you would open a TV and just mute it, there's a lot of things that you could notice, you could see, you could kind of tell how the person is feeling, what is going on, even if you can't listen to the language. And that is because what they're saying is animated, it's embodied, and we can see it in that way in their bodies. So it's all of these things together. So one of the sort of not founders, the elders, let's say, in the field of embodiments is Richard Strozzi Heckler, and he has a very kind of distinctions that he puts. So he says, you could work on the body. So that if we say, let's say in the yoga, because you mentioned yoga, so working on the body is how do you sculpt this body, how it looks, that aesthetic of it. It's beautiful, and it's, all these kind of standards. So that's working on the body as an object. Another distinction with it, where you can you add the mindfulness part of it, is working with the body. So you're noticing how you are in the body. You're noticing, oh, I'm stressed now, I'm relaxed, and all that. Now, the third layer, which is embodiment, is working through the body as a body of a vehicle of or a process of change and living as well. So we are our bodies, no matter how much we'd want to. Some people would want to kind of put that like, oh, that's. It's just, and we're not here to have pleasure and all that, and pleasure is a sin and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm there for. And that's not what makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's not how I see it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I definitely agree with you on that we are our body, we are our mind, we are our spirit, but we're each one of those things, and we're the summation of all of those things, kind of that 3 in 1, right? We are one person. We're not 3 people. You are one individual. I am one single individual, but I have 3 parts, and those 3 parts are this. It is me. I am my body. I am the seat of my emotions, my mind, my soul, if you will, and I am my spirit. I am it's that 3 in 1 sort of not dichotomy, but sort of that tension of being, the tension of reality.
It is, and really those distinctions is very much an internal experience. So it's not like you could see it differently, that this is a mind, this is and the spirit. It's how we feel about something, and it's really all of them together. It's bringing it as a whole, that each informs the other, not in a disconnect. So the opposite of embodiment will be disembodiment, and that's where I think the state of most of the world right now is living completely in just the head as the chief, as the organizer, as the important part that is not, other than what's going on in our thoughts is dismissed. So emotions are dismissed, body sensation is dismissed as secondary or not even important, and that's it's disharmony. So we're saying, thinking brain is the only and most important. And what embodiment comes in and saying, no, the thinking brain is great. We need that. We need the logic. We need the analysis. We need that kind of intelligence, if we put it that way. But what about the brain, the body brain, the felt brain? That brings a lot of, that's where our intuition comes from, our emotions come from. That is also a huge source of intelligence. That's our body wisdom. So, and if we're focusing a lot on embodiment and coming back to our body, it's because we have disconnected from it. So it's in the practices that I do, and, a lot of embodiment teachers do, is kind of bringing that also to the surface so we could work with both intelligences, with both brains as a whole.
Earlier you mentioned that we are, the summation of our experiences. We are the summation of our physical body, where we grew up, the culture of our family, the culture of our school, our neighborhood, our chemistry. In the embodiment practice, would you say that you believe in determinism, in that we do not have any sort of free will, but we are just a bag of chemicals that are firing, or just social constructionism, saying you are the way you are because of your environment? Or do you believe that there is a level of agency, that there is a level of free will, and that it is the choices that we make, the thought life that we choose to guard, to walk in, the thought processes we choose to adopt, the way that we choose to react in the face of opposition or hurt or just being wounded? How much of that do you see as, well, that's just determinism? You are the way you are. Just embrace your feelings. If you're feeling envious or hateful or rage-filled, that's okay. Just embrace that. Or are you saying you actually have agency and power over those emotions, and you have a responsibility to steward those emotions in a way that is right, in a way that is righteous, in a way that is life-giving and blessing to other people? How would you see that dichotomy there?
That's a really interesting question, and choice is quite an interesting thing, because in many times we kind of think that we have a choice, but we are actually responding out of a pattern that we think that we're making a choice.
So here, I'm gonna pause you really quick.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
do you have agency and self-control is my question. Obviously, oftentimes we're in a pattern and we're just doing what our pattern says, but do you actually have agency and self-control to stop? Do you believe?
Okay. Yes.
There's a more pointed question in it.
Yes, I do. And it's not a straightforward process because, the foundation of all of that is the awareness part of it. So awareness of what I am doing right now. If I don't have any idea what I'm doing right now, there is no space for me to make a choice. There's no space for me to change, because how would you change or make a choice if you don't have no idea where you're starting from? So the awareness part is like, okay, so I notice, I'll give you an example from my life with my own children. So I get, kind of ticked off, or, how, as we say,
triggered.
I get my buttons.
You get triggered.
My buttons get pushed, and I get all agitated, and I throw a tantrum myself as an adult. And I blame it on my kids, and I get into that kind of a fight or kind of a tension. And I did that for a while, and then, I could say, okay, yes, my dad was the same way, very reactive, very, impulsive in that sense. So at that moment, I could, say, this is who I am. There's nothing I could do about it, and full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the awareness part of it, when I started this whole journey of connecting back to myself and becoming aware of what is going on internally, I thankfully, and I think it's a great blessing, is that, I've noticed, like, okay, so I'm doing something that it's not productive, and I'd like to change that. So I started saying, okay, this is something I need to change. I cannot do it overnight, because it has to be an embodied, felt, sort of downloaded into my cells. So what I did is practice centering, which is coming back to my breath, feeling the sensations, feeling calm down, and doing that practice over and over and over until my ability to take that breath when something starts to escalate, I'm better able to recognize first that, okay, now my shoulders are tensing and we're heading into the argument. Let me take a step back and take a breath, center myself, take care of whatever I need to do, and come to that space of I am actually able to make that choice.
Right. Right.
So that comes with practice until I've changed that pattern. And, so I say awareness is a big part of it. It's the first step. Also understanding our physical body, our biology, how our nervous system works, which is, once we're stressed, whatever that is, our survival impulse comes in. We go, the nervous system goes into the fight or flight or freeze response. That's like, okay, and this is, I need to defend myself. So it's either I'm fighting, and this is my kind of more of habitual pattern, or I'm going to run out of the scene, or I'm just going to freeze. So, and those states, the nervous system is either hyper-aroused or hyper-aroused. By intentionally practicing, staying with my what experts call the window of tolerance, or that space that within me that can be in a social engagement aspect where I could make judgment simply because when we're in a survival mode, our prefrontal cortex does
shut
not
down.
Function.
Right.
So if I can have the ability to bring myself down from that hyperarousal to that state of, and we say it clear thinking, then that space, that is the best place for me to make a choice. So I don't, it's a process. And what I would like to say here that it can be really difficult for people to overcome that because, of traumatic experiencing, of things that happened. It could be really overwhelming for a person to recognize that they're in a stress response, and they absolutely don't have the capacity to come back and then make a choice.
Yeah, what I hear you saying, it's like if you don't recognize that you have a problem, then you're just going to keep on repeating the same things over, the same patterns, the same generational brokenness over and over and over again. Especially, I mean, I've this past week, I've had so many conversations with people about the normalization of hypersexuality, the normalization of pedophilia, especially it's coming out, with this Cuties movie on Netflix, and everyone's talking about the normalization of that, and then pairing it with that there is so much normalization of abuse, and there's so much normalization of anxiety. I mean, the conversations of people that I hear, at least in the circles that I'm connected with, they're saying that, yeah, everyone just accepts the fact that everyone that they know is abused as children. They just accept the fact that everyone's dealing with suicide and depression and anxiety, where really the numbers since 2007 of depression and society among teens has skyrocketed, just at least the numbers that are coming out of America. And I'm assuming that those numbers are probably congruent on trend with most of the globe, at least the globe that's connected with the internet and mobile devices. But with that, there's this normalization and saying like, oh, we just laugh at it. Oh, it's normal. Oh, it's okay. Oh, this is just our world that we have to deal with. And because we don't recognize that this is actually a really dark and grave issue, we just let it continue. And no, that's probably that is kind of more of an extreme example of something that you're talking about, but it's a deeper underlying social problem and issue that we're facing right now in the world, where if we don't recognize that these things are issues, we'll normalize them, we'll embrace them, and we'll continue on in these destructive cycles.
Absolutely. And you said something in the beginning, and you said responsibility. And if you break that down, it's the responsibility. So it's your ability to respond to things. And that is really different from reactivity, where it's coming out of that. So yes, there are a responsibility as a person, as a society, as as a community, in saying, okay, these things do exist, and we need to address them. We need to find ways to help those people. And, special anxiety, and I don't say this lightly, but it seems sometimes that it's more of not a trend in that everyone is trying to do that, but it's, I hear what you're saying about normalization, that it's something that happens to all of us, and therefore it's, it's okay that it's happening. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of for a lack of a better word, not an okay thing to happen.
Exactly. And I understand where people are coming from in it. They're saying, it's okay to struggle. It's okay to be you. It's the whole kind of be kind to yourself, don't beat yourself up, to try to alleviate shame. But in the midst of that, I feel that the trap, right? It's like there's ditches on both sides of the road. And where some of those ditches, the one side of it is you're super hard on yourself, and being hard on yourself just creates more anxiety, and you're just in this vicious cycle. The other ditch is saying, well, everyone deals with it and you're hopeless, you're stuck in it. You just need to learn to manage it, but there's no escape. There's no escape from depression. There's no escape from these suicidal thoughts. There's no escape from the generational abuse that has gone on. You are stuck in it because you don't have the ability to respond. You are a victim. And I think at least what I hear you saying is, well, you're not a victim. You have to be aware. You have to take responsibility. You have to take the responsibility, because we all have that, to grow the ability to respond correctly, because we all have the ability to have self-control. Science has even proven that we have free won't, which means that, and this was a previous interview with Dr. Michael Egnor, who is a neurosurgeon who has performed over 7,000 surgeries. He was sharing how there have been experiments that show that there's something that happens in the brain before we go and press a button. And so that demonstrates that there's a reaction that happens before we're even conscious of the decision that we made. But then in that same moment, the experiment goes on where the experimenter said, okay, now I want you to decide to press the button, but before you press the button, decide not to press the button. And when that person decided to press it and then not press it, there was no more spike in the brainwaves. And what it proved was that there's actually a spiritual dimension by which we make decisions and have the ability to restrain ourselves within those moments. And that's something that you even kind of mentioned about, okay, I'm becoming aware and conscious that I am stressed and that I'm not thinking clearly. Okay, how do I take a step back? How do I take a pause on this argument and say, okay, I need a timeout. I'm realizing I'm triggered. I'm realizing that my thoughts are in this cycle. My frontal cortex is not operating correctly. I'm going to choose to withdraw myself until I can get out of my cycle, get untriggered, and then decide to respond, and decide to respond when I have the ability to respond in that. So I kind of lost the trail a little bit, but coming back to it, there's two ditches. And I think the way forward is realizing that actually there is a path to real freedom, that we are not victims in our circumstances, and we do not just need to learn to manage our dysfunction, to manage our depression, to manage our anxiety, but there's actually a path to holistic healing. In my circles, we use the word sozo, which means healing and restoration and freedom of both mind, soul, spirit, body, which is similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, dealing with anxiety and dealing with all those two ditches that you mentioned, that many times that I see that we're really trying to solve the problem. And when I say we as collective, we're trying to solve this from a mental perspective, from what needs to happen from our thinking. And there's a lot of value for cognitive behavior therapy, and all these things have its place.
Yes.
Yeah. But the thing is, we're trying to heal ourselves. So we're trying to heal this collective of body, mind, emotion, spirit, but we're not really addressing or using the body, which is a huge component in it. And that's why a lot of things, if you want to have it from a mental perspective, you keep telling yourself, like affirmations, they might work, but if it's only that, if it's just my thinking brain is telling me what to do, it's not going to work. It might work, but it might take a really, really, really long time. And that's why embodiment is such a really an important field or thing that we want to see more of, is bringing back the body into this. So it's not about dealing with anxious thoughts. It's also sensing how we are, connecting with how is my breathing right now? How is my posture right now? So, and I think that's a very important piece that is in many ways has been, not even recognized in the way of healing. On the other part, you mentioned earlier, sometimes there's so much focus on healing on a spiritual level that is also disconnected from all thoughts and our body sensations. If we want to get to somewhere, to that ability to respond, to ability to choose, all of these components would have to come in play. Mm-hmm. And really, the body, one of my teachers used to say, it's like the highway. It's much easier for me to recognize with practice that, this conversation or this situation is, I need to step back from it if I notice that there is some tingling on my shoulders, instead of going too far and getting into that rage where, going back is no longer an option. Mm. So I think that there's a lot that we are agreeing here on a subtle level.
Yeah, I think we agree on a lot of the kind of outer shell when we look at the holistic, and we were even in the pre-interview when we were messaging back and forth. I think there's a lot that we agree on. I think the path to that is where we're going to find disagreement. But before we get into that, I want to hear more about what you do in parenting. I was listening to one of your podcasts today. It was one of your IGTVs, and you were talking about that if we have a problem in parenting, and I think I understood you correctly, the problem is not the child. The problem is you. The problem is you from probably years ago when that child was 1, 2, 3, and the patterns that you developed, the way that you treat it. And this is, my wife and I, we have 4 just absolutely amazing boys. I mean, just the kindest, sweetest boys. And all the time, people are coming to my wife. They're not coming to me because I think people are wise enough to recognize that she does all the work. I'm like, yeah, my kids are great, and she did it. But they're always coming to us and asking, and that is one of the first things that my wife says, that if you are experiencing a problem within your kids, within your relationship with your children, it's probably your issue. The responsibility rests on your shoulders first. How are you raising and engaging? So I would love to hear some of the things that you teach, how you help people kind of, and what some of your ideology, methodology, mindset in teaching parents how to take upon that responsibility to maintain self-control over themselves and engaging with those relationships.
Yes. And that's a lesson I've learned, well into my parenting journey. So I would have been great if I had that. But, I think as humans, we kind of learn when we are, at, rock bottom, not when we are just reading a book before having any kids. So yeah, and I've mentioned this earlier, so I get, very reactive and I get stressed a lot. At least I used to. I'm getting better. So my reaction over the little things was not very healthy, and now reflecting it back. And I've always, kind of was trying to teach the kids, okay, so if something happens, take a few breaths. Don't get stressed over the small things. And then one day when I saw that mirror that is our kids, and I recognized myself in one of my kids' behaviors, and I was like, oh my goodness, this needs to change. This is the hard truth. And it's just like, I know no parent would love that moment, but it's like, oh my goodness, And I say this without any guilt. I believe in when you do know better, you do better. But it's like, okay, so I, created this pattern that has been created in me, and I'm creating it with my own kids. So when I decided to, or became aware of, okay, how do I do that? And it was quite a long process. It didn't happen overnight. Then I recognized that, really kids learn from what we do, not what we say.
Yeah.
And as I dug deeper into learning about our nervous system and how our nervous system regulates, self-regulates, and co-regulates, then I realized there was and the importance of that sense of safety that children, we all need. But, as children, we need it more because we are very helpless, is the foundation of a healthy, attachment with our children and with our caregivers. So this is kind of the foundation, is recognizing that whatever our kids are doing, it's sort of they're feeding off from what we are doing. So their behaviors, a lot of things. I had, issues with my behaviors of my kids, and I've always kind of jumped to the experts on what to do. So you do this, and you create this structure, and you create this behavior modification plan, and all these things. And they might work, but the main part that needed change is myself.
Right.
And that, when I started doing that affected the behavior. It at least it did not escalate things. So that's the number one thing I'm telling parents when I'm doing the sessions, the group coaching sessions, is that it starts with you. It's not about your child. We do come with our temperaments and behaviors and all that, but essentially, if the child does not feel safe, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And nothing would work. So how we can restore that sense of safety within us first, and understand that what we do, what we feel, is very important. Then we could start getting somewhere. So, the first thing that I teach is self-awareness, is how basically what we do affects how we do things. So if we're, as simple as, tensing our muscles all the time, we have our shoulders up to our ears, and we're having, our palms in a fist, we are not relaxed. You could even sense it with a person if they're, if that. So our kids see that and understand that we're tense, we are stressed. If I can't recognize what I am doing, if I can't recognize what my children see, then I'm not in a place where I can choose how I want them to feel, or not how I want them to feel, but how I'm feeling and how I want them to recognize that. So that's the first layer of it. It could be simple, and you could experiment with that, and, walk with your heads looking down, with your shoulders hunched, and notice how you feel about that. And then, bring your shoulders up and have your eyes look at the horizon. And you'd notice a shift, because how we posture ourselves affects how we, our perspective as a whole.
Yeah.
So that's the basic first thing. Then it's centering, it's self-regulating, of coming back to the space I spoke about earlier, is that space where I can think clearly, where I could feel okay. And I've learned that this is an important thing to do, because that's how our kids learn to self-soothe, to feel safe. So, and then, one of the major things about parenting is that we try to do it perfectly, and there's no room for error. And that is not true. even, experts would tell you, it's something that that does not exist. So that, for parents to understand that, what, I'm doing all these things. Sometimes I do fall short, and sometimes I don't have the capacity to do things, and that's all right, as long as we're repairing if anything happens. The rupture and repair, something, I get all kind of riled up and I'm stressed about something at work and I kind of snap at my kids. That happens. That's it's life.
Right.
The difference is me recognizing that happened and going and saying, okay, this happened, and repairing it.
Right. It's not
simply.
it's not the absence of conflict, but how do you resolve conflict? And it's
exactly,
in our relationship with our kids, my wife and I, that's the thing. It's like recognizing, okay, I messed up. I'm going to go repent to them. I'm going to go and apologize to my children, if only to set that example of saying, when you mess up, you apologize. You own your, how you hurt someone. You own your action. You take responsibility for your actions. Now, you said a couple things that I wanted to touch on. One of them, again, it was just coming back to, I don't know if I like the word awareness, but in some ways it is the awareness. It is that hitting rock bottom conviction, if you will, of saying there is a problem and there is something wrong. And that is kind of one of the points that drives us to making change. Rather than just knowledge, but it's actually the experience and feeling the brokenness and admitting that we are broken, which actually drives us to the point of asking questions and trying to find answers, not just knowledge, not just knowing better. And one thing that my wife and I always go back to is what is the definition of love? What does it mean to love? And one of the things that love is that love covers a multitude of sins. And one of the strategies or tools that we employ when we recognize that, okay, there's a conflict going on with our kids, or maybe acting out in a certain way, we kind of bring it back to what you're saying. In the kids need that place of safety. They need to know that they have a sense of belonging. They have a sense of safety, that they can trust their parents. We come back to us and say, have I been loving my kid? Whether they're chewing their nails or whether they're kind of hanging their head or responding in kind of a grumpy manner. Instead of coming down hard on them, our first kind of step is like, have we been loving them well? And when we recognize that we haven't, it's like, okay, instead of going to behavior modification, we're going to go to love. We're going to sit and spend extra time with that child to bring them into that relationship. And oftentimes that brings a sense of healing. So, and not just a sense of healing, but that brings that restoration within a relationship. I heard something recently this week, and I've heard it many times before in my life and articulated many ways. But oftentimes we go to behavioral modification to get right relationship, whether it's with God or whether with other people, right? Most of religion is behavioral modification. It's saying, I'm going to modify my behavior enough in order to get this right relationship with my wife or with my children. I'm going to modify my behavior enough in order to get right standing with God. But the reality is that that behavioral modification doesn't put us in right standing or right relationship with people, but it's right relationship which produces the right action. It produces the behavioral modification, if you will, that we are yearning for. And actually, we have that backwards. Oftentimes, we're doing things to gain the affection of people, to gain the approval of people, rather than starting from the baseline of, I'm going to have right relationship, and out of that springs the behaviors that we want or yearn to see in our relationships. We have to go to a break. Do not go away. We are going to be back with Manal, and we're going to begin to dive into probably some of the more spiritual side of her work and maybe where we end up disagreeing. So roll on over to the next episode and we'll see you there. Thank you so much for listening. Please, if you have a question about this episode or any other episodes, I would love to hear them. You can WhatsApp me at +1 202 922 0220. And also my book, Anchored: The Discipline to Stop Drifting. I wrote this book in a time of my life where I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. All of the metrics that I had of what it meant to be productive just slipped away. And so I wrote this book, and it's filled with just short principles, ideas by which I can build a framework, and which you can build a framework to be able to take steps forward in life to reach your dreams and reach your goals without putting heavy weights and heavy expectations on yourself. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you are a truth seeker who goes out and uncovers your purpose. So go and own your future this week.